and welcome everyone to our Azure Percept Ask the Expert session. I am Krista St. Pierre and I lead the Azure Percept product management team here at Microsoft, and I am thrilled to be hosting this session for you all today. Before we dive into your questions, and I'm hoping, and I know that there are probably many, I just wanted to provide a super quick recap of Roanne and Mo's session. Azure Percept is a comprehensive, easy-to-use platform with added security for creating edge AI solutions. And today we are very pleased to announce Azure Percept SDK by ASUS, which includes Azure Percept Vision, the Azure Percept Audio Accessory, and Azure Percept Studio, all of which come together to make it really simple for you to start prototyping in minutes. So let me just get to the next slide here. Bear with me for a minute. So Azure Percept SDK by ASUS is a pilot-ready development kit. It includes a carrier board, mounting tools, and Azure Percept Vision, a camera-enabled system on module for rapid prototyping. Azure Percept Vision adds camera and vision functions optimized for things such as industrial and retail environments. It powers scenarios such as shelf stock analytics, people and object detection, and loss prevention, among other uses. This development kit is deeply integrated to work with Azure AI, Azure Machine Learning, and Azure IoT management services right out of the box. And your development kit can easily be extended with Azure Percept Audio, an audio hardware accelerator with a pre-configured 4-mic linear array to create customized speech functions that react to spoken commands, keyword spotting, and far-field speech to local listening devices. All of the elements of our development kit and accessories include a unique 80/20 profile integration that make it really simple for you to quickly take your prototypes from your desktop, where you start your prototyping, directly into environments where you can easily validate your prototype in an end-to-end scenario. Now advancing, excuse me, there we go. Hopefully we've got the next slide. Okay, great. And we didn't stop with the hardware. Today we also announced Azure Percept Studio. Azure Percept Studio is a complete platform for easily creating edge AI solutions and includes an integrated collection of Azure services and tools designed for device provisioning, AI and machine learning deployments, and AI lifecycle management at the edge, making it simple for developers of all skills to rapidly get going on their edge AI prototype. So with that, I would love to introduce, there we go, the experts who are joining me here today on this call and meeting. I am super pleased to be here with George Moore, Principal Manager, Program Manager on our team, leading our customer success organization, Henry Hires, our CTO for Azure Edge Devices, Dan Rosenstein, Principal Group Product Manager, and Sven Grunitz, Director of Program Management. All of which are here and standing by to answer your questions as they come in. And so let me check here real quick. It looks like we already have questions coming in, so very exciting. Okay, so let me get started with a question that we're getting asked often is, how much does the development kit cost? How much is the accessory? What markets is it available in? And for that question, I'd love to hand off to Sven Grunitz, our director of our hardware delivery organization. So Sven.
All right.
Are you there to answer?
I'm there. I hope I'm live and you can hear me.
I can hear you. Thank you.
The Azure Percept SDK has a suggested retail price of $349, and the Azure Percept Audio has a suggested retail price of $79. Both are available in the US right now, while for pre-order at the Microsoft Store, and we'll make it available in 15 additional countries within the next 2 months. And I know Dan Rosenstein has a list ready. He's publishing in the Q&A section right now that has the details.
Excellent. Thank you, Sven. Great. And here's the next question that we have coming in here. And I'm going to ask Henry to answer this one. The question is, how does Azure Percept integrate with Azure IoT Hub, device provisioning, stream analytics, and time series insight?
Sure. Thanks, Krista. So Azure Percept is first and foremost an Azure IoT device. So we leverage Azure IoT Hub to manage this device. And in fact, when you get your Azure Percept systems, you will see them showing up in Azure IoT. That means that we also take advantage of all the other Azure services, including DPS. So you get to access DPS. And if you wanted to access both services on the cloud or that can be deployed, you can do it just the same way you do with Azure IoT today. We're just extending that platform. So it is by all means an Azure IoT device.
Great, thanks, Henry, and keep your camera on because I think the next question's for you too. Percept sounds great for relatively large devices powered by Cortex-A or Intel processors. Will you extend into the world of little IoT devices like sensors and actuators?
Yeah, so Percepta is primarily targeted to answer the needs of our customers and partners. Today, there's nothing intrinsic on the technology that would restrict our ability to go to these use cases. Our first dev kits are, as you will point out, in the Cortex-A space, but we'd love to hear more about the use cases you have in mind. The technology itself, we believe, can scale either down or up.
Thank you, Henry. Right, so I think we're seeing some more questions coming in here. Let's look. Okay, so this question is for George. It says, hi, thanks for the session. So you're welcome and thank you for joining us. Theoretically, would this system be something that could be used to collect sports data from events such as football matches, perhaps in a similar vein to Pixelot iFollow?
Hi, thanks for asking the question. So the work we're doing is primarily around an RGB sensor just collecting standard video data. In this case, it's being presented to a local AI processor that's actually built into the Azure Percept device. So this is, it's not instrumentation of the sports field or instrumentation of, the ball or velocity, angular velocity, or anything like that. This is purely video data, audio data that is processed at the edge. So absolutely, you could build AI models that could detect players, player movement, ball movement, all of those things, but it's not directly designed for collecting sensor data from other sensor types that are on the ball field, for example.
Great, thank you, George. And it looks like we have a question around our plans to integrate 4G or 5G into the device. I'll take that one. I will say absolutely, that is on our product roadmap. So please stay tuned as we continue to build out the capabilities and future releases for the product. Let's see. It looks like we have a few more questions coming in. Just checking the chat right now.
So, Krista, I can take the LVA question.
Oh, great.
The question is this completely separate from LVA? Azure Percept actually can integrate and use LVA as part of the video pipeline. In fact, one of the samples that we provide in the toolkit itself is a people detector application that uses LVA to perform the video sync process, the video sync functions, to emit the H.264 video stream wrapped in an RTSP wrapper, which can be fed to, for example, Azure Media Services. So LVA is designed to work with Percept, and it is integrated in a number of the samples that we have.
Great, thank you, George. And actually, I'll go to Henry for this next one, Henry, about gateways. If you're open and available for this one, it looks like there's a question that says, will there also be some gateways available to support AI models for time series data processing on the edge?
Yeah, certainly. So the Azure Percept payload, it's a component that is deployed onto an Azure IoT device. Now, there are solutions that can be built, and by solution I mean a complete set of components that whether web service or models that can actually incorporate streams from cameras. Now, in order to do that, you will need an Azure Percept device that is able to host this payload. Yes, the technology accommodates for that. At this point, we're announcing the dev kit, and it's in partnerships with third-party companies that we would actually explore how to put this dev kit into other form factors that would allow for the streams to be brought into the Azure payload, Azure Percept payload.
Great, thanks, Henry. And you could keep your camera on because I think this is a great follow-on question around, does Azure Percept work with Azure Stack, Edge, Hub, HCI, or only with Azure Cloud?
Oh, so that's a great question. Azure Percept is an Azure IoT device. So I know you probably heard that Azure Stack Hub now has the ability to run Azure IoT locally. The ability to integrate Azure IoT gives you the ability to treat an Azure Percept device as an Azure IoT device. There are other services that we provide on top of that to ensure things like attestation of the device and the end-to-end pipeline integration. Those services do require cloud connectivity right now. So if you want to use all the functionality of Azure Percept, you will require cloud connectivity for now.
Great, thank you, Henry. And it looks like we have some questions coming in around plans to capture more than RGB data, other sensor data. And for that, I'd like to go to George.
Sure. So RGB data, yes, you're right. The Percept device is primarily, the vision device is designed for RGB primarily. I want to point out, though, that there are a number of AI models that can actually be used to detect volumetric data. For example, being able to do irregular shape fill matching of a mask, such as models such as UNet or Mask-R CNN. And those models are supported on Percept. So you actually can use this to do some degree of volumetric analysis visually, optically. But if you're referring to other sensor types, then certainly we're running Linux in the device itself and running arbitrary Linux Docker containers from IoT Edge. So you can absolutely build whatever business logic you want and run it to, if you so chose, incorporate other sensor data from other sensor types that could land at the edge.
Great, thanks, George. And you could keep your camera on. There seems to be one more question. It's super specific, but very interesting. So, will we be able to use the product to monitor animals? And in this case, set an alert when an animal behaves strangely, i.e., a horse isn't able to get up after a certain amount of time. Scenarios like that.
So Phoenicia mentioned that I'm actually working with another company on herd management for cattle, because cattle, when they get sick or when they are in certain other forms of duress, they tend to move differently, behave differently, stand apart from the herd. And so there's a number of different ways to attack this. You can absolutely do just recognition of animals themselves. You can train up a model of a horse lying down and be able to recognize in general when that occurs. If you want to be more sophisticated, there are actually open source examples of pose detection for humans that have full skeletal joint manipulation, and those could be adapted for use in animals. So if you wanted to know if a horse was in a certain posture or a cow was in a certain posture, you could do that. That's really the beauty of the system, is that you can bring models like this, bring your own intellectual property, bring your own training data, and build some very sophisticated models that can run at the edge.
Actually, as a follow-on to that, George, there's a question, and I think this is where you were starting to go. Does the studio environment only support a limited number of possible models, or can you upload your own custom models too?
So we are, yes, you can upload your own models. We've tested, and Intel has tested over 90 models from the Intel Model Zoo that run on the Intel Movidius Myriad X, which is the vision processing unit that's built into the Azure Percept Vision camera. So any of those models would work, or you could build your own models. What we're actually doing is open sourcing the inferencing application itself. So the inferencing application itself runs as a container in IoT Edge. So you can take that source code, you can build whatever models you want into that inferencing application and download it and manage it as a container, as a first-class container within the IoT Edge ecosystem on your Percept device.
Thank you, George. And then it looks like there's some questions coming in here for you, Henry. Are there plans to expand Percept hardware to include USB accelerators or neural compute sticks that can be used with SBCs such as Raspberry Pi?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the Azure Percept promise, it's based on 3 components, right? It's that hardware that we trust and that we endorse for hardware acceleration, is the software stack that we provide on top of that, and the services that we enable to provide that. That hardware acceleration component, it's of course an open conversation with our partners. Right now we're talking with several silicon partners, but if you have a silicon that you're particularly interested in, we'd love to hear about that from you. And if you're a silicon manufacturer, please reach out. There'll be an email that is posted on the live Q&A. We are in active conversations, but right now we're not announcing anything at this point.
Thanks, Henry. And one more question while you have your camera on. Is it possible to link these Percept devices to IoT devices, edge devices, excuse me?
Yeah, so what I understand from that is whether you can actually have these devices interact with other Azure IoT devices. And the answer is yes. These devices are just other Azure IoT devices fundamentally, so you can treat them as such. Now, the Azure Percept services will only be deployed to the Azure Percept device, but this Azure Percept device can interconnect with other components. And I saw another question about cameras, for instance, being able to connect to it. If you have another camera that's able to stream through an RTSP channel, you will be able to take that input into an Azure Percept and then be able to process the Azure Percept and say send that information to another Azure IoT device. We just leverage the full Azure IoT framework as you know it today.
Yep. Thank you, Henry.
Sure.
Looks like there's some scenario questions here for you, George. So one question here. Says,
how can enterprise take advantage of Edge AI? Certainly, I talk to enterprise customers all the time. And absolutely the answer is yes. In fact, I have not met an enterprise customer so far that has not come forth with 20, 30, 40, 50 different AI scenarios that could be executed upon the Percept device. It's actually quite astonishing to see the explosion of ideas and brainstorming that can occur. So absolutely, the whole point of the work we're doing is that enterprises, both from a business and a security perspective, specifically around security, can take their own models, take their own intellectual property, securely be able to download and run those at the edge and be able to get, if you so chose, signed results back from the devices so you verify the fact that the inferencing happens on the device that you believe that has actually been deployed.
Great, thank you, George. Let's see, a couple of other questions that have come in. One is, are there any additional Percept devices planned? The team is busy, we're working, expect continued momentum and future announcements from us in this space. So please stay tuned. We have lots more that we are investigating and exploring and developing. And then another question around what kinds of tools or skills are required to obtain quick results. One of the key attributes of what we've built is that regardless of the type of skill set in terms of development capabilities that you bring to this problem set, there are some really easy on-ramp solutions that will enable you to quickly get to prototyping real world scenarios in combination with our developer kit, and then we've built a really integrated and seamless out-of-box experience so that once you get through that out-of-box experience, you're already integrated with a set of Azure IoT capabilities and services. And from there, you can go into the Azure Percept Studio, which is really, think about that as an easy on-ramp to exploring all of the capabilities that Azure brings to bear around managing your devices and your life cycle of the models themselves, all the way through to training and deploying AI models at the edge. And so really one of the things we've invested a great deal of time in is to make these scenarios accessible to all different types of users looking to gather business insights from deploying AI at the edge. Okay, great. So let me go back to this. Here's another one for you, Henry. It says, hi, great session, so thank you. This person has been trying to read documents on Percept as well. Does this work with data historians for industrial sensor data? And how does this work and differ from Azure Edge?
Sure, thanks for the question. So in terms of other sensors, we actually have some interesting explorations taking place in private previews. So on that email that was posted there, you can reach out and talk about the sensors that you have. The dev kit today comes with the eye and ear sensor, but we do have explorations with other types of sensors that would allow you to do that type of integration. In terms of how does it differ from Azure Edge, I assume you're talking about Azure Stack Edge. Azure Stack Edge is a full-blown solution for all types of line of business applications, and it is really an endpoint to the cloud. Azure Percept today is more about the IoT devices and these very specific AI components. So it is a subset of the functionality that Azure Stack Edge would do, and it's an opinionated view on how that gets implemented to make it more streamlined and end-to-end. So Azure Stack Edge will be able to tolerate, for instance, or no, not tolerate, but support a entire line of business applications, fairly large, highly available setups. Azure IoT is more about the sensors and the AI running on top of those sensors.
Great, thank you, Henry. And here's a great question for you, George, that I see that just came in. Is the cost for implementing Azure Percept devices, computer vision, and any licensing and support affordable when working with small, medium businesses, or are these aimed towards the larger corporation?
Thanks for the question. So this is actually designed for all users, both small, medium, and large corporations. The work we're doing is actually, as Henry mentioned, a logical layer on top of Azure IoT. So really beyond the basic cost, the outright cost of the device, there are no built-in additional billing meters for the Santa Cruz or the Percept devices. So we really logically layer on top of the existing IoT charges, IoT hub implementation billing models. So if you bring other third-party AI models to the device, of course, there may be licensing charges according to those from third parties, but the outright cost to get started with the device is extremely low. The outright cost to run the device is also extremely low.
Great, thank you, George. And here's a good question coming in for you, Henry. It says, why are you not reusing the Azure Sphere?
Thanks, that's a great question. And it goes back to what is the statement that we're making about these products, right? Azure Sphere is very specific to the level of security for these really small devices that are deployed in the millions out there. And it is a statement about the security and integrity of that device for that specific function. And we have partners, and we just announced a great partnership with NXP around this. In the context of Azure Percept, it's really about this third-party motion that is going to much larger devices, integrating with different types of cameras, different types of sensors, and so on. And in that space, a Sphere is really more about the individual components. This is more about a third-party play. So there's nothing that precludes an integration of those. It's just that we wanted to make it a little bit more open and have the ability for third-party to innovate as well.
Great, thanks, Henry. And while I have you live on camera, here's another question for you. Somebody is asking us around how does Openvino fit in with Azure Percept?
That's a great question. So the current dev kit has a MediaTek component inside of it. So the AI pipeline starts with training of a model on the cloud, but what Percept does is that it actually optimizes that model to run performantly on the hardware that's running on the edge. That's one of the big improvements that we're bringing to this process. Openvino has been integrated with our Onyx platform for quite some time now to be able to deliver that optimization. So in effect, what we are doing when we perform this model optimization so that it can run on the edge is we're leveraging those components along with the Onyx runtime platform for it.
Great, thank you, Henry. Okay, so let's take this question around nested edge to you, George. So there's a question here that says, can Azure Percept device act as a downstream child device of a regular Azure IoT Edge gateway, as in nested edge?
So the answer is yes, absolutely. That's the whole point of us layering on top of the existing Azure IoT ecosystem and platform, is that we support nested edge devices, and a Percept device can be a nested child component of the nested edge ecosystem according to the ISA 95 standard from a layering perspective. So it's actually a very common scenario where you have perhaps limited bandwidth into a building or a factory or a warehouse, and you may have hundreds or thousands of Percept devices inside. You don't want those all individually to wake up and decide to update themselves and saturate your single lines. You can, in fact, push a package down, push a set of containers down, and use a gateway device inside, push the package down once, and then use a gateway device inside the building to then disseminate that package to all the Percept devices within that building.
Great, thanks, George. And while you're live on camera here, here's another question for you. Are the devices capable of sending data to Azure to train your own models in the cloud before applying them locally?
Yes, absolutely. So the Azure Percept Vision Kit, the dev kit itself, contains, as we mentioned, Intel Movidius Myriad X. It actually has hardware-generated support for a H.264 video stream. So you can actually send, in fact, we have example sources for how to do this, to send the raw video, the H.264 video, to the cloud for archival reasons. You can also send it to a local edge device for archive reasons. And the really nice thing is you can, if you had an AI model, you can actually have the AI model executing alongside and synchronized with the video. So therefore, you could essentially index the video based upon interesting events, such as when you want to actually capture new training data. You could index the video based upon an AI model and use this to essentially help bootstrap or improve your AI models over time. And these index marks can then be synchronized, or you can use that to synchronize with the video in order to extract out keyframes that you may want for later downstream training.
Excellent, thank you, George. And hopefully we have time for just one more question here. This one is for you, Henry. Somebody is asking, you know, what is the difference between Azure IoT and Azure Percept?
And that's a great question. And for that, I'm actually going to be sharing the diagram that's part of our Under the Hood post. In that blog post, you can see that an Azure Percept device does leverage the Azure IoT platform. So it does behave like an Azure IoT device. Nevertheless, we actually extend that by providing additional services and this experience around Azure Percept Studio. And these services on the cloud are not only providing additional functionality in the cloud, but they are supported by components that are running specifically on the device. So we have extended, for instance, the host OS, which is Mariner Linux, with our own OS extensions. And we have a very specific hardware accelerator so that we can support this Azure Percept payload. So in essence, this is an Azure IoT device, but it's much more than an IoT device. What turns it into an Azure Percept device is this hardware accelerator, the Percept OS extensions, and the services that enable this payload to be able to be deployed and run more effectively.
Excellent, thank you, Henry. Okay, and so with that, I believe we are about out of time. I want to thank everyone for joining us here today for this session and continue the conversation. We have lots of documentation available on the documentation site. There's more information on GitHub. And we're looking forward to seeing all of the things that you all may create with Azure Percept DK and the Azure Percept Studio. Thank you very much.